Fear of rejection can be a pretty debilitating nervous system pattern, not only when it comes to our relationships with other people, but actually our relationship to ourselves and to our body. Hey, it's Alicia, and this is another video in my series on nervous system patterns. So if you haven't checked out the other videos that I may have done, depending on when you're watching this is the second one I'm putting out. But there might be more depending on when you're watching it. So definitely check them out and subscribe to the channel if you're new here, if you want to learn more about nervous system patterns, your body, your mind-body connection. So I want to talk about fear of rejection because it is something that I've seen show up in many of my clients and students as it relates to their body. And it may be something that they're really aware of when it comes to relationships, especially romantic ones, but they never really put the pieces together about how that actually shows up in the relationship to their body. So I want to dive into why is this a nervous system pattern? Like, why do I call it a nervous system pattern? How does it actually show up? What's really going on here? Because fear of rejection, pretty human, sounds pretty common, pretty probably widespread, but there's more here. There's deeper fears going on that are controlling our behavior and automating that behavior. It's happening at the level below our awareness usually, and it dictates our life until we make it conscious. So I want to bring these things into consciousness. So if you have this pattern, you can begin to actually work with it in a conscious way and hopefully rewire yourself and create a new pattern in its place. So whenever I encounter fear of rejection in people, I've noticed some other patterns that tend to come with it. And I want to just state for the record that this has never been a huge pattern of mine. So unlike other patterns that I'll talk about, I'll identify when it's a pattern that I've seen in myself and worked on in myself. This is not one that I've had to work with too much. So I'm speaking more about working with other people. I think he'd be okay with me sharing this, but Stefan, my man, my partner, has had this pattern. So I've gotten an intimate look at it in our relationship and then just being in a relationship with him, but it's also shown up with many of my students and clients. So I've typically seen in this pattern a tendency towards victim mentality, as well as a really deep need for external validation. And that tends to drive this fear, right? Because we crave, when you're in this pattern, you tend to crave external validation, which would be someone saying yes to you instead of rejecting you, right? And then when they say yes and you're not rejected and you're actually accepted or validated, you feel safe. So our nervous system patterns typically arise to keep us feeling safe. And they're totally appropriate when they're created, usually in childhood, in circumstances when, maybe we did rely on the tribe or our family or, social situations in school or whatever to feel okay enough to move through life, right? Because these are where these patterns really get created, is when we determine at the subconscious level, like our nervous system is actually learning what the world is, learning how to be human, learning, oh, this is what happens when I assert myself. People tend to reject me or say no or laugh at me or shame me or whatever it is, right? And so you retreat inside somewhere a little safer. And then you automate behaviors to avoid the pain of whatever it is, right? In this case, fear of rejection. Why? Because the pain of rejection is actually worse for you, for whatever reason, than the pain of just asking enough times until you get that yes. So all of our nervous system patterns are really a swapping of I'd rather be, alone and lonely and disconnected than rejected, right? And then because why? Well, not only are you alone, you're rejected. So you have to deal with that pain on top of still being alone. So the way that this shows up with the body is really interesting to me. fascinating because I've seen people actually express these fears of rejection with their body. So if you are working on your own body, let's say, or even if you hire somebody or work with somebody that you're paying to help you with your body, and you have a deep fear of rejection, very likely that is getting projected onto your body. And so you're going to perhaps encounter an automated behavior that will actually inhibit you from moving forward to the extent that your body rejects you. So this could show up, if you're working with your body, in patterns such as putting off doing what you think you should be doing to heal your body, giving it a half-hearted effort. Like maybe you want to commit to a fascia release routine and you give it like 1 or 2 days and then you just stop. And you kind of know that it's probably going to take more than a couple days to get the result you want, but you just stop. It's like something in you just doesn't let you move forward. So these are some of the ways that it can kind of show up there. Maybe you say things out loud to whoever you're working with or to yourself, like, but what if this doesn't work? Like, what if I give it my all and it still doesn't work? So that's a lot of the language that I'll hear is, what if it doesn't work, in all the ways that could possibly show up. And what's happening here is you're afraid your body is going to reject your efforts. And what's really going on here is, you don't want to encounter that pain, right, of rejection, because imagine believing that your own body is rejecting you and rejecting your efforts. So what do we do about this? How do we interrupt this pattern? Well, I want to start with, and this will be true of any nervous system pattern, but so if fear of rejection is not your thing, you could extrapolate what I'm about to say to maybe whatever you're noticing in yourself. But rejection is simply information. That's it, and it could be as simple as, this isn't the right person for me. I'm not the right person for them. It's the wrong time, right? It's just we're just not a match. And when you look at it objectively, there's nothing wrong with that being true, right? So somebody who doesn't have a fear of rejection, might be able to approach that experience very differently. But if you're coming from that place of, I need you to say yes to me for me to feel okay, for me to feel safe, right? Then that sets us up for a whole other experience. But I want to turn this back around now to the body. If we're looking at the body and our relationship to it as, just information, if you begin and actually commit to some kind of routine to get where you want to go with your body, and maybe, let's say you get worse. So you're starting fascia release or whatever it is you're doing to help your body, and your pain actually gets worse. It's just information, right? But if you are filtering that information through the lens of fear of rejection, then you're probably going to color it like, see, even my body doesn't like me, doesn't like what I do. It just gives me this awful pain signal no matter what I do, no matter what I try. It always, then we spiral into that story, right, of victimhood and blaming. So you're going to blame your body. But if you can look at it as simply information, it might just be similar to asking someone out, and maybe it's just the wrong person, the wrong match, the wrong timing. With our body, it may simply be, this isn't what I needed. So if I'm the body speaking, this isn't what I need you to do something else, right? That's just information, and it's actually very good information, very valuable information. And if we can actually turn towards that experience without filtering it through this lens of fear of rejection and the pain that causes and not wanting to experience it, then we get to learn something about our body. And so I propose that it is actually through listening to your body and meeting the needs of your body in this way, in the willingness to actually receive the data, the information that is objective, that you learn to actually meet your own internal needs. Because this is how I would propose that you begin to filter this fear of rejection lens through a higher perspective lens, through, maybe you want to call it your higher self. if you go ask somebody out or you approach someone in a potentially new friendship and it just doesn't work out, or they say no, even if they laugh in your face, right? What you do in that moment will determine, right, what happens next, whether you learn something and grow or spiral back into and that victim story. You could in that moment really filter that through some objective questions like, is it like, maybe it is me, maybe it's not me. But if I'm being really honest, am I actually the person that I want my ideal partner, or that my ideal partner would want or choose? And am I willing to be that honest with myself, right? Because a lot of the time when we fear rejection, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because we keep ourselves in certain behaviors that actually perpetuate the story that we're going to get rejected. Why? Because perhaps we're not the person ultimately that we want ourselves to be. We're not living in our greatest potential. We're living in the story of victimhood and a need for external validation instead of being driven by internal validation and not needing that external validation to feel okay, right? And so I don't know if you've ever experienced this either on the side of fear of rejection, or maybe someone asking you out and you can tell they have a fear of rejection, but it's not exactly sexy, when there's deep attachment to what you say to somebody that you can experience in them. Like, they're not going to be okay if you say no. Like, that doesn't feel very good, right? But if that person, you can tell energetically, is going to be totally fine if you say no, that you might actually say yes to them because that's sexy. So the more we can turn inside and actually become the person we want to be for ourselves and use internal validation, the more we can learn, right, from all of these experiences. So with our body, turning it back to that, like I said, it might be, this isn't what my body needs. Okay, let me try something else. Maybe I overdid it in this one area, or maybe I didn't hit the right spot, or maybe I still have a nervous system pattern going on, or maybe, I don't know, but you keep going and you keep searching instead of spiraling back into that other story of blame, victimhood, and see, I'm always going to be rejected. So ultimately, the work here is in seeing that your psyche needs to get to a place where it's okay with your body giving you information that you might deem painful, because this is something we have to work with to be in connection with our body. We have to give our body what it needs for it to be healthy, right? And we're not always the best at that. But the more we can listen and become that person for our body and actually have a symbiotic relationship and let it be okay that sometimes our body is saying, hey, I don't like that you just did that. I don't like that you just ate that. I don't like that you just, sit all the time and don't strengthen your posterior chain. That's why I'm giving you this pain signal, right? And if we can look at it that way, it is just information. So I want to filter this pattern through a bigger, broader meta lens that I've been playing with a little bit, and invite you to just try this on, for yourself and see if it fits. I believe most of our fears actually fall into two categories, either fear of pain or fear of freedom. And this is something I'm going to talk more about, but right now I'm just going to talk about how this fear of rejection plays into this pattern. So I would say that fear of rejection is fear of pain. And fear of pain, in my experience, is fear of world knowledge, fear of going out in the world and actually seeing the way the world is, not the way we want it to be, the way it actually is. And why is that painful and why would we fear it? Well, let's say you do ask somebody out that you actually know fairly well and they are the type of person you really want to be with. And maybe they give you feedback like, you're not the person I want to be with because you're not living up to your potential, or, I see this and this in you. If you are willing to actually look at yourself objectively through the lens of meeting yourself in the world, because I believe we actually don't know ourselves until we go out in the world and bump up against other people and experiences. That's how we get to know ourselves, right? Like, to give you a bit of a different example, I love using climbing mountains as a metaphor for life. Like, how you climb a mountain is how you do life. And I've brought many, many people on these Colorado 14er mountain climbs before, and it's always fascinating to me how we each interact with the experience. It's really hard. You're going to an elevation that's challenging from an oxygen perspective. Sometimes you encounter dangerous territory. Sometimes there might be a lightning storm at the top, et cetera, et cetera. And how we meet that experience shows us kind of how we do life. And I would say the same thing is true in these micro patterns at the nervous system level in life. But it isn't until you go climb that mountain that you get to know what you're actually made of, right? Do you give up easily? Do you want to turn around? Are you complaining a lot? Or are you summoning some will and spirit you didn't even know you had? Are you proud of yourself when you get to the top? Are you judging yourself for how slow you were, right? There's so many things that we can learn. And the same is true of fear of rejection. So if you are willing to actually go out and face this fear of rejection over and over and over and learn from it, wow, when I ask this person out, I'm being the person I want to be. I did it. I don't need them to say yes. I'm the person I'm being simply for asking them out, right? Or, wow, I didn't realize I would be so shaky and that I would have so much shame and that my face would turn bright red. And when they said no, I immediately went into a story. Isn't that interesting? Like, can you put yourself in observer mode about what actually goes on in you when you do it? But here's the thing. When these patterns are automated, most of the time what's going to happen is you see someone you like, you want to ask them out, you start heading in their direction, and your body literally turns you the other way, and you go order a tea, even though you already have a coffee on your table or whatever, right? Like, your body actually is like, oh, no, you don't. So you have to work with this consciously, and despite what's happening in your body, despite turning bright red, despite sweating, you go do it anyway, and you learn from it, right? So the first time you climb a mountain, you might be like, holy crap, I'm out of shape. That's objectively true. Like, yes, this is a mountain, and yes, they're hard, but I need to get real with myself. Like, I'm out of shape. So when you go ask the person out, wow, I really suck at this. Like, I'm not very good at flirting or asking people out, but I'm determined to get better, right? So this is how you actually work with it consciously, and the same thing is true with your body. And so ultimately, working with this pattern, fear of rejection, is about meeting your own inner needs, deep in you, like who you really want to be in the world, instead of letting this fear of pain drive your behavior and give you a life that maybe isn't the life you actually really truly want in your soul. So just to bring it full circle back to the body, you can use that same experience. Okay, I'm gonna commit, or I'm at least gonna go for it. And then I'm gonna be honest with myself. Like, did I give it my all, or did I wuss out? Like, did I stop, my efforts very soon in the process because I'm afraid of rejection? Okay, all right, I forgive myself. I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna commit again right now. It's a process that these usually aren't switches that we just flip on and off when it comes to nervous system patterns. And getting conscious of them is the first step. So just being honest with yourself and being conscious of the fact that it is a pattern and that it is driving you, and that you actually have a lot of control here, and your conscious self, can change it. That is the first step. So I'd love for you to share below this video if you have this pattern. Maybe you don't, and you know someone who has it. And maybe, it is inspiring you, as with my last video, to see people in a new light, perhaps, that maybe it's yourself, maybe it's your relationship to your body. And I would also love to hear if you have specific questions for me on this topic of nervous system patterns. There are a whole bunch of patterns. And like I said, ultimately, they're going to come down to these two things, fear of pain or fear of freedom. So I'm going to talk more about that as well. So if you have any questions for me about this that you want me to answer in a future episode, drop them below. I will definitely be listening and reading those. And this, just a reminder again, this is a process. So to have patience with yourself, forgiveness for messing up, and then just keep moving forward and keep working on the consciousness aspect and the awareness of the pattern, because that is the primary thing that's going to break it. So can't wait to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.